Hey watercolor wizards, Hajra here. Thanks for parking your brushes here and let the epic art adventures begin. Today I'll be painting a Mucha study in watercolor over my ink drawing. As far as supplies go, for this project I used an HB pencil and a soft eraser to do the sketch for this, and I also used a black Zig Writer marker to do my ink lines, and it's a waterproof light fast marker. I'm also going to be using a synthetic 1/4 inch angle brush, size 1 and 4 round brush with a fine point, a quadruple 0 spotter brush for really tiny details as needed. I have my cloth towel around, which is a green reusable option for dabbing water and paint. I've got my water cup. It's got 2 water wells, one for rinsing muddy brushes and the other with clean water for wetting and diluting my paint. And I have a paint mixing palette, porcelain or metal palettes. And I won't be using this leftover paint on this side, but I'm going to be using the rest of this space to mix paint as needed. And my drawing's been done on Arch's hot press 140-pound watercolor paper. And I like the Arch's cold press almost as much as I like the Arch's hot press, so you can also use that. So this is like a 4 by 10 inch size, I think. So this might be too small for some people. I think this is a 7 by 10 inch size paper. I stopped at the half figure point for here. For the one that I'm going to be doing here privately, I'm going to attempt to do the whole figure. You can see I have inked up the whole thing on the smaller piece of paper. So again, if you choose to do this at whatever size is comfortable for you. And also, if you want to, you can even crop down. Maybe you only want to do up to the head and hand, and that's still a very pretty piece. Or you can do a half figure, or you can do the full figure, depending on how much you feel like you can finish. I'm not putting the stars in, for example, on this one, but you can always come back in with white gouache, do the stars, or save them. And I think I'm going to be using the Mission Magella gold colors that I got. Dark blue, purple, and a yellow for this painting. Just a little teeny tiny bit of red or the pink to make a skin color. So flesh tone, a black and white are usually considered neutrals outside of the rest of your color scheme, making your tones and your tints for you. And flesh tones because usually you find them in skin colors. And some people bring in an extra flesh color from outside, but I try to mix my flesh tone from the colors I have available. Hopefully I'll be able to mix it with a little bit of the yellow and maybe the little bit of the pink. My cerulean blue as my blue, and I might add a little bit of violet. And the reason I'm putting it down in the blue-violet section is I'm not going to use it unmixed with the blue. I'm always going to add a little bit of blue to it to make it into a blue-violet. Yellow light. Use a little bit of the opera rose that I have here. And boy, that looks fluorescent on the screen. Skin color that has pink in it. A little bit of the yellow in here that it can fade it down. And the colors I'll be using the most are this yellow, a little bit of the flesh tone, this blue-violet. I'm going to have a little bit of the blue too, but not really these secondary mixes. I'm going to be using wet on dry, where paint is applied to dry paper and it dries with hard edges unless you soften it. I'm also going to be using wet and wet, where my paint is going to be applied to wet paper for soft abstract bleeds, and also wet on dry with a soft blended edge with a damp clean brush for a gradient effect, which I use a whole lot. And you can see my video on hard and soft real-time blended edges if you want more information on that. I'm also going to be doing glazing, which is thin translucent layers of paint in sections for luminous results, and it's great if you're layering transparent watercolors. This works really well. This is going to be mostly subtractive painting, going from light to dark in values and color intensity in the traditional transparent watercolor fashion. And highlight retention is going to be mostly then through traditional white of the paper, unless I screw up something, and then I'm going to maybe have a highlight here and there with some corrective white gouache. Okay, so I worked first on the face, a little bit of wet on wet, and then also wet on dry with blended edges as I go, and give it a little bit of a glow, and just build up a little bit of a layer of rim lighting there. So I want the rim lighting around the edge of the face to look like it's reflecting the crescent moon behind her. So she's got that highlight edge of rim lighting around the edges of her contours of her chin and cheeks. Highlight in the sort of eye socket, bottom eye socket of her eyes, the bottom of the chin, and also the center of the forehead and the nose to show that there's light reflecting because she's in the moonlight. When it comes to the lips, most of them are covered, and you can leave it just a simple triangle shape, but if you just smear the edges a little bit to make it look like her lips are a little bit smushed or have a little bit of a soft edge, it'll look way more real. Blur that edge a little bit and it'll make it a lot better. Wanted to just sort of get it up to enough of a point where I feel like the face hasn't failed before I move on to the rest of the piece. I think I might go ahead and save the values and details later I'm going to come back, like I said, and work on the face and the hair and everything later, but let's do the background first, wet and wet with the stars and everything. So when I'm doing the background first, wet and wet, it's really going to help me set up my dark value meter for the rest of the painting. And because I've gone ahead and put in my stars with the wax, you can see how it's providing me with some great star white areas here that are not going to get darker. And the other thing that is nice is that I can go around while this is still wet and add a little bit of a halo around that star as it darkens into the rest of the sky, and I can do the same thing with the moon area as well. And I am trying to keep it darker where it's darker in his painting and then lighter where it's lighter in his painting. And the reason he hasn't made it uniform, apart from interest, is that where the folds are lighter, the sky is darker. Where the folds are darker, the sky is lighter. So it's going to provide some great value contrast automatically like that. Making sure there's, again, a bit of a halo around the wax star and also the moon. Okay, so let's do the same thing on this side. And on this side, I'm also going to drop in the darkest, where there's the darkest area here. And I can see that's around the stars again. And so I'm going to drop that in. And I love how he's done that sort of bloomy effect here, where it's really dark and then it gets lighter in other parts of the sky. And I just don't think the blue is dark enough on its own, which is why I have been adding the purple. And there we go, my star pop-ups again with the wax resist. And those wax pencils or crayons, clear wax crayons, are so cheap, and I think they're like $2 or something for a pack of 5, and they work super well. I'm going to come back and lift up around the stars like I was doing on the other side. I want to just rub at those edges a bit to make them just a bit softer around the outline of the star. Just making little circular motions. And it's not a huge difference, but it's noticeable to me. The skin is going to look a little bit multicolored in different places is because I'm trying to give the colors a bit of a bluish bias in some places, a yellow bias in other places, and a reddish pink bias in other places. There's a little bit of wet and wet happening on its own as I put the first color stain down and drop in some colors over it, but once that part dries out, I really am using wet on dry with a blended damp edge so I can have more control over where my shadows go. I just tried to have a little bit of a mix of everything to create something like a glow, because if I just had used one color all throughout, then you don't get that sort of illusion of translucency that we can see here in the skin. We're not going to get that if I had just used the one color throughout. So using a combination of these colors in different areas, just like in past demonstrations that I've shown, really makes it so that it looks like the skin has translucency to it because it has these different colors showing. And this is a brown that's mixed from all 3 of these colors. It's going to have like a greenish brownish color to it because it's got the yellow and the blue and the pink mixed into it. So my art tips that are specific to this project would be that if you want to make your study faster, you can, as I was saying earlier, crop this to only do half of the figure, or crop it to do only the head and the neck and the lifted hand area. Even those crops would make great studies and you don't have to do the full figure. You can also skip the star pattern on the fabric, as it will make it a faster study for you. And inking the sketch first like I have will make the painting easier. It pulls a whole image together before we even bring the paint in. And so this will be an easier study than something that we would be doing by somebody like Leyendecker or Sunblom, Waterhouse, Parrish, Jesse Wilcox Smith, or anybody else who didn't use ink lines the way that Mucha did. As you're doing studies of him, you'll realize that he was a much more powerful layout planner and inker, and his colors and shading were less rendered, especially in pieces where he was using a lot of ink. So usually these colors are playing second fiddle and are easier to apply, so once you get past the sketch and ink stage, you're actually going to be able to apply the colors a little bit more of a relaxed fashion. The folds in the fabric here are semi-real, semi-stylized, like many other Golden Age artists who added whimsy to their textile interpretations, and actually makes them more artistic and more whimsical and fantastical than if he had followed them exactly. And an example of an artist who's following folds exactly is Maxfield Parrish, who I think can end up having rather boring folds as a result of him painting over his transferred photocopies. Maxfield Parrish was often painting over these printed photographs with oil paints. His folds, I think, end up being way more boring than what Mucha did or what Dulac did. And another example of somebody who did more realistic folds, but still made them very stylish, also has this idea of making them look like they're semi-real, but you can definitely see that they've been exaggerated and stylized and made more pretty. Along with Mucha, I think Leyendecker has the best fabrics that I have found in the Golden Age. Let's deconstruct this piece a bit. Make note of some of the compositional decisions that Mucha made. He tilted the lady's head to one side to make it asymmetrical inside the round crescent moon, so there's more interest than if it had just been a boring central head. And likewise, he's got asymmetrical folds in her robes for better visual interest. They're bunched and bulkier to one side in the crook of her arm when she's holding them. And again, it makes them much more interesting than if they'd just been symmetrical on both sides. Going back to using your ABCs for your layout and composition, this tall, narrow solo figure looks like a letter I composition. And as with any other verticals, you'll get a feeling of regalness and loftiness and some tension as a result of there being just that tall, narrow look to it. And there wasn't any golden mean applied to the focal points here. It's too long and narrow a rectangle to be applying the golden ratio. Instead, you've got a more centralized icon, monument, portrait layout going on here. What he uses instead is value contrast to grab your attention where the head area is lighter than the background or the robes. And he also uses a very limited color scheme to depict the sky, the moon, and the stars. Remember, the less colors, the better chance you have for successful art and color harmony. And I always aim for 1 to 6 colors max for my paintings. And this painting is really limited in colors, that it's almost just a value painting in one color like a grisaille. And you can see that the round moon also provides a bright highlight and also a halo type spotlight to direct our gaze to her head. We're also just going to be looking at the head naturally because it's got features, it's got a face, so we as humans are naturally drawn to something that's a head or a hand. And in this case, you've got a head and a hand right there, and it's inside of a bright halo, so we're looking right at it. And the round circle is also repeated for emphasis in the floral coronet shape and also the hairstyle, which has circular loops of hair at the edges. Also, there's lots of circle repetition in the circles formed from stars on the robe, so you can see that he does a lot of this shape repetition once he gets a theme going. And you can see that the lifted hand and arm also serve as an arrow and an active diagonal to point to the face. And again, it's adding more energy with those angles. Instead of just having more boring horizontal lines or mirroring vertical lines, he's added a lot of active diagonals. And we can see more of these active diagonals in both of the arms together that also form a triangle that points to the face. And the shoulders are also angled as yet another triangle that's pointing to her face. And just like he repeated his circles theme, we can see that there's many more triangles formed by the folds in her costume for further energy via the diagonals and also for rhythm and repetition of a triangle theme in this painting. A lot of people ask, is this planned or is it an accident? Well, for most artists, it's a mix of both deliberate layout decisions and also your subconscious aesthetic that is pushing you towards what looks more pleasing as a decision. In the case of Alphonse Mucha, we can probably err on the side of saying that it was planned because he really was a master of composition and decorative layout, and he spent a lot of time looking at that stuff and figuring it out. I would say that he probably planned most of it. When you're working on the floral headdress, make it random organic shapes. Don't underestimate the power of suggestion. Plus, the original Mucha reference for this piece is small and blurry, and it was the only image available that I could find, so making up shapes for the headdress is the only option anyway. But random suggestions just work great, even if you have a higher resolution reference available. They'll look just as good, if not better, than what you're trying to copy, because they'll look natural and not stilted. So I finished the flowers in her hair, and again, I did them really wet, just really random, and just wanted to make sure I got a good balance of colors that sort of conveyed the reddish color that's showing up in the skin tone and also echoing the blue that's going to show up in the sky and also in her robes, so that we've got some color harmony going there. And that's pretty much it. Pop in the teeniest, tiniest highlight, and I don't see it in the original, but I think it'll really help pop those eyes. I'm gonna go ahead and add just the teeniest bit of white to this piece, strands that I've seen drawn into the hair, and just give us back some of those strands. Okay, so I'm working on the robes, and they're gonna be easier than what I did for the labyrinth piece because there's just so much more ink here. So I don't have to be as careful about getting soft edges and about getting those blends because the ink is going to hide a lot of those hard edges. So I really just have to pay attention to where I can see the shadows are in the reference and then try to just put the darker blue down there and the lighter blue down in other places. And I'm going to be doing this mostly wet on dry, but I did do a little bit of wet and wet like I was saying earlier. And I also added in a little bit of yellow and I went back and put that into the robes in some areas. So it's a counterpoint sort of warm temperature to the blue robes, and it also sort of makes it look like, because she's the moon, she's got yellow moonlight on her. And I was gonna leave that as white moonlight, but I actually went back and put a little bit of a yellow halo around the moon because I realized that it actually looks more interesting with a little bit of that yellow there. And again, it sort of harmonizes a little bit with the warmth in her skin and her headpiece. So I've got warm highlights in the yellow and then cooler, darker shadows with the blue in the robes that she's wearing. It's not really there in the original reference, and I've done this before for other Mucha pieces where I've used complements or near complements as warm and cool highlight versus shadow, and it's because it just makes some of these folds more interesting than if I had just used one color and then used white paper for the highlight. Using the paint for the warmer highlight actually makes it glow a bit more, and again, it seems very suitable for this painting because it's the moon. The hardest part of this piece was planning the idea of what I wanted to do to change the color scheme and then working on the skin. So if you can get past the face and the skin part of it with those shadows and that skin, then it's actually, the rest of it is going to be pretty easy because the robes and the headdress are easier than working on something that doesn't have any ink there, and the background of course is all loose, wet, and wet. The ink does take some work in the beginning, but it also pulls everything together for you so that your painting part is easier. In the future, when I do a master's class, I'm probably going to try to do something without ink so people can then sort of step up a little bit of the difficulty of trying to do a piece that has either less ink than the one that we're doing today or no ink at all. But definitely there is a lot to be learned here still. Remember to make use of value contrast within the ink piece and also when you're painting it. That golden saying that I love to repeat, art is like life. If you get your values right, everything else is easy, because once you have your proper values locked in, you could even get the colors wrong here and there and you'll still be okay. To assess your values as you're building them in, you can squint or take a digital photo and desaturate your art or your reference to black and white only so you can observe it just for the values without the colors distracting you. And you can also place a red plastic film over your art or your reference so you can only see your values. Let's not forget that when you do go to add in your colors that you're going to want to have some temperature contrast of warm and cool colors. My warmer yellow contrasting with my cooler dark blue. This is a very limited color scheme painting, so it should be pretty easy to see that interplay of the simple warm versus a simple cool. You can always revisit your art after several days with fresh eyes so you can make final adjustments, and if you're short on time you can always take a photo and see your painting smaller on your phone to assess it, or flip it upside down, or view it reversed in a mirror. All these things will let you see where you need to maybe make some corrections or adjustments in color or value or shape and form. And if you do want to add your stars, if you're not going to skip them, then they can be added last with a white gel pen or gouache, or you can save them as the bare paper first using a wax crayon mask or masking fluid. Some or all of the ink lines may need to be re-inked if they are subdued by your paint colors, and this is going to be common if you're using gouache or other opaque colors. I'm hoping I won't have to do that because I'm using just watercolor. The artist that we're studying here is the amazing Alphonse Mucha, who lived from 1860 to 1939, and he was a Czech painter, illustrator, jewelry and interior designer, and his signature style borrowed heavily from Eastern art. The geometric vegetal and the flowing swirls of arabesques in Islamic art, as well as the graphic bold ink lines of Japanese block prints. It's no surprise that because I'm also an East-West hybrid that I really like his style, because I can see how it's making the best of both Eastern aesthetic mixed with a Western aesthetic. There's a lot of repeated themes in Mucha's art, and some of them are beautiful women, especially metaphors personified, like flowers or gems or seasons, the moon, the stars, and lots of other things drawn in the form of women. And this is one of them. Here we're painting a lady who is the moon personified. He also often made use of thick ink outlines, and he would have softer edges within his forms with hard ink outlines and edges that separated the figures very clearly from the background. And it's sort of a visual exclamation point that separates starkly a figure from a background. He also made use of a lot of decadent Byzantine Islamic jewelry and headpieces, Islamic vegetal geometric arabesque decorations, and botanical decorations. In this piece, she's not wearing any jewelry or headpieces, but we do get to see a lot of that vegetal geometric repeating circles and triangles here. Mucha was also known for his delicate pastel colors, and he really did let the decorative embellishments, his bold ink work, and his stylish layouts take center stage. Conversely, his colors were more muted, more delicate, usually in a pastel color scheme. He also made use of halo designs, which were used non-religiously, and they were very prominent in his work. And again, this piece is an example of that. He also had lots of Grecian flowing robes for a very implied paradise mythological feel, and there's very little or no structured or modern clothing in a lot of his paintings, unless it was period costumes for like the Slav epic or other historical paintings that he was doing. And again, this painting shows an example of those flowing robes. If you can actually paint fabric and the folds in it, that's actually a really fast costume, because you don't have to go and buy anything. You just have to get your model a bed sheet and drape it all around in a compositionally interesting way, and you've got your costume for that piece. He was known initially for his theater and ad posters, especially his distinct decorative posters of theater actress Sarah Bernhardt. And Mucha considered his 20 oil paintings, a Slav epic, to be his most important work, though he's now ironically remembered for Art Nouveau ad posters. He wanted to be remembered for his historical art. He was active in his church and also had a really advanced musical education, and he was good at playing instruments and singing, but he was also in love with painting, so he decided to pursue that of all the other interests that he had as a professional career. He was actually rejected from the Academy of Fine Arts in Prague at the age of 17 and was told to find a different career, and I think we're all very happy that he continued to persist in the direction he wanted. Mucha was also influenced by mural painters that he met in Prague and France, and also photography, which was growing more and more during his time, and that really affected his painting style. Photography allowed for the fixed and exaggerated and fantastical poses that he captured in so many of his poster illustrations, and it's definitely a tool that helped him really get his signature look. He moved and studied informally till he was 30, and then did magazine illustrations in Paris. He was actually friends with Paul Gauguin and shared a studio with him in 1893. In 1894 was when his career took that dramatic and unexpected turn with a Gismonda poster that he did at larger-than-life scale for Sarah Bernhardt. And none of this theater actress's regular artists were available due to the Christmas holiday, so he was hired to do that poster. And it was released in January of 1895, and it caused a sensation. Mucha was suddenly famous, and Bernhardt ordered 4,000 copies of this flattering poster and gave him a 6-year contract. And again, he had that really, at that time, distinct and new feeling East-West hybrid style that had Islamic Byzantine influence via the floral vegetal decor and geometric designs and swirling arabesques, and also his bold inkwork choices that were inspired from Japanese art. And he ended up doing theater posters with lots of decoration, also theater programs, sets, costumes, and jewelry for Bernhardt. And after that, he ended up with lots of commissions from other clients and created art in many forms, whether it was ad and poster illustrations, oil paintings, especially for his Slav epic series, jewelry, wallpaper, sculptures, murals, stained glass, furniture, decor, enamels, porcelain. This guy did it all. He was so popular that at his height he did a train poster with no trains in it, just his signature arabesques and decor and florals and a pretty woman. And imagine doing a poster advertisement for something like a train and not having a train in it at all, but I guess you could get away with it if you're a Mucha. Later, he moved to the US and taught in art and design schools, and Charles Richard Crane became his wealthy and most important patron in the US and funded his desire to do the Slav epic. And Crane's daughter was in fact featured in Mucha's Slav painting and also on the Czech 100 koruna bill. One of the important things to remember about his use of photos is that he was sort of subscribing to the school of thought that no memory, no matter how good, can improve on nature. So what you see will always be more accurate and real than what you can recall or imagine. Although there's certainly nothing wrong with using your imagination or your memory to draw and paint stuff. If you have a photograph or a live reference available, you'll always get much more information, obviously. So as such, Mucha used photographs to realistically pose his figures and costume folds, and then he added the decorative elements and backgrounds later through his imagination and great sense of style. So he was doing what I think the best artists do, which is combining his imagination with what he was using from live or photo reference. By the end of his life, Mucha's art and Art Nouveau style was sadly not in fashion, and he was even interrogated by the Nazis for 7 days because he was a nationalist Slav from Czechoslovakia and also a Freemason and a devout Catholic, so he was a prime target of German fascists. He ended up dying of pneumonia just weeks after his release by the Germans in July 1939, which was only a few weeks before World War II officially started. And it's a really sad way to have treated such an amazing genius of an artist. After his death, he wasn't popular again for decades, even in his own country, and just considered out of style. Slav epic paintings that he was so proud of were not appreciated by his own country and were tucked away for nearly 3 decades. His poster art has seen a resurgence of popularity, so he's more lucky than other gifted artists who've been forgotten altogether, though he's not remembered most for the serious historical art that he wanted to be known for. I think we can all agree, though, that just about everything this man touched was beautiful. I just like him as a whole. Done studies of him many times for good reason, because I feel like he really represents the best of the stuff that I like too, which is decor, embellishment, exaggerated poses, a little bit of a comic book mystique, and great choices for composition and decorative elements. Please like, comment, subscribe, and check out my website for all my online platform links on one page, or see my links in the description box below to support my art creation and instruction. Thanks for parking your brushes here, and wishing you all epic art adventures.